Hello, both of you. I seem to be in a slightly darkened room. Apologies for that. A dark, shadowy figure to add to the suspense with a side of murder theme. Na, 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 na. Hello, Mandy. Hello, Fran. Thanks for joining me. I thought that last panel was absolutely fascinating. Loved hearing Helen talk to the guys. And obviously we cross over quite a lot with crime in our genre and the genre that you two are both writing in with your first books for Avon. Do you want to do the elevator pitch thing first and foremost and tell us a quick rundown of what your books are about? Fran, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So The Lighthouse, which is out in February, is about six friends who travel to a remote Scottish island for a reunion weekend, and they're going to stay in a lighthouse. And on the first night, one of the six friends disappears. And when he's found early the next morning, he is really shaken and he refuses to tell his friends what happened to him. And they try and get back on track, but then strange things start to happen. And it's unclear whether he is protecting his friends by not telling them what happened or if he's putting them in more danger.
I absolutely loved it. I thought the setting was amazing. We'll get onto that bit in a minute. But Mandy, do you want to tell us similarly succinct, well done fashion, what your book is about? Just Another Liar.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So my book is about three women, Anna, Denise and Petra. And for various reasons, they all decide to try online dating to meet someone. They all end up falling in love with the gorgeous, dishy Dr. David Kingfisher. But when they haven't met him for about 3 months, they start to wonder if David is actually all he seems. So they get together, they team up and decide to hunt David down. But what they don't know is that someone is hunting them, and before long, one of them will end up dead. So.
I love them both, like I said. Well, while we're on with you, Mandy, should we go next to one thing I wanted to talk about was character in suspense novels and in psychological fiction, because I think plot is obviously such a driver in these books, isn't it? And we talk about the twists and keeping that pace going. But for me, the thing that really elevates a book in this genre is those strong characters, because I think then you can really get that motivation and that background which gives the characters reason to behave in these often terrible awful ways, and that really jumped out at me in your book. I thought I can picture even now Denise with her pear drops, and I thought these three women were so well painted. I thought you just did a really good job. So two-part question really. Firstly, how did you go about creating such strong characters, and second, was that a really important thing for you to keep that on a level as important as the plot and the twists and the suspense?
Yeah, perhaps I'll start with the second question first. So yeah, I mean, I love books with a twist, as we all do, and I think Just Another Lie has obviously got hopefully a good twist at the end. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, for me, we all want to care about characters, don't we? That's why we carry on reading a book. We all want to find out what happens to them, and why they're doing what they're doing. And so yeah, and I've always loved reading character-driven novels and writing them as well. So yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work beforehand on characters, the backgrounds, the motivations. I always like to start as well with, what is it that they're scared of? Because I think that drives their motivations throughout the book. So in Just Another Liar, all three women are scared of being alone, really, and scared of loneliness. That's one of the themes of the novel. So I took that theme, that thing that they were scared of, and then just saw how different women would react to that and how it would influence how they move through the story. But I do think that, characters, I don't know if you think this as well, both of you, but they do change. You know, you think you've got them all planned out, but actually once you start writing the novel, they do things, or they become people that you weren't expecting. So, you know, I did.
Did you find that as well, Fran? Do you find that similarly, that your characters evolve as they're going, and how much work do you do on character as well? Do you do the background planning and the character profiles in a similar way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily do the full character profile layout. I tend to have kind of either archetypes or kind of areas I want to have a look at, and look more kind of at how characters are related to each other. But I think that I historically am a bit of a pantser, and so I tend to do a lot of discovery writing even before I start actually drafting, and so I'll do lots of bits and pieces from certain characters' points of view. And so in that way, it becomes kind of like a very organic character development, because it feels almost like getting to know them through their voice.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that before. I'm similar.
It's a lot of fun.
Profiles. Yeah, that's a totally other way of going about it, but that's a really good idea. It's so interesting, isn't it, hearing other people's process, and like you say, referring to the pantser, which I thought was Helen's term from the panel before. The planner or pantser was something I was going to ask actually, but we'll come to that later. One thing I really wanted to touch on was setting, which I'll stay with you, Fran. Now we're chatting, and then we'll go to Mandy next. But setting again, I mean, it may be the most fundamental thing, I think, to psych suspense novels, because you know, the panel we saw before, there's grisly murders and there's people Googling how to boil a head. And that's not us most of the time, is it? But we're trying to get in people's heads without quite so much of the physical stuff happening. And a major way you can do that, I think, is playing with setting, isn't it? And making that setting somewhere that the reader really, really can imagine, and not in a good way often. How important was that to you with the Lighthouse? Was that your starting point? Because it felt like it was, to be honest. It felt like such a strong character in itself, the Lighthouse and that setting. Was that where you started with the book?
Yes. So the setting to me is always, if not the most important, then it is very, very important. I love writing very atmospheric books, and I feel like to get a sense of the atmosphere, you really need a sense of place, and how that place then interacts with the characters and how the characters interact with the place. So with the Lighthouse, I knew I wanted something really isolated, because when you are in an isolated place, it brings out certain elements of your personality that maybe don't come out when you're at home, particularly if you're with people who you've not seen for a while or you've known for a long time. I feel like there's certain things rumbling in there, and sense of place is just, I feel like it's really, really key to getting that kind of bubbling uncertainty building from the outset.
Yeah, I thought you did that brilliantly. I really did. I think the other difficulty you had in terms of the isolation is in 2021, getting somewhere where people aren't glued to their phones is like, cut them off, turn off the signal. And any way you can do that realistically, which obviously yours totally was, is great as well, and really kind of adds to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to be honest as well, like we're talking about obviously research and things that we Google, and you'd be surprised how much Googling was involved in terms of working out like health and safety in lighthouses and, you know, holiday accommodation.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. Yeah. That's so funny. How about you, Mandy? How about setting for you? Do you decide where your novel is set first and work from there, or does that come later, or how do you do it in terms of setting?
Well, I think with this novel, I wanted to set it pretty close to where I live, just to cut down on the research, really.
In COVID, I think a lot of writers did that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I did move one of the characters, so she comes up to, I should probably say I live I'll say near to Manchester. So she comes up from the southwest up to Manchester for a reason which I won't go into here. So she's like a fish out of water, which, you know, reflects how she is in the novel as well. She is a fish out of water with what's going on emotionally, the things that are happening. But yeah, I think it's important, you know, with domestic noir, as you know, mine is, to, you know, really build a sense of place for people. So I do go into quite a lot of detail about the houses where the three women live.
Yeah, and one of the houses that they visit, I think, was particularly, I'll be careful in terms of spoilers, but I think there was one house that was extremely, as soon as you went in there, you almost held your breath. You felt you going in there with them, because it was a very unsettling place. And
definitely. So yeah, it's I agree with Fran. It's really, really important to build that atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously a lot of psych suspense rests on the bad guy, and we're going to have a hard time talking about this now, because we can't talk about who the bad guy is in both of your novels, because we want all the reviewers and journalists and readers who are watching to get to read the book and get the joy of guessing and finding out. I love writing the bad guy, and I think writing psych suspense, half the fun of it is sowing the seeds for the fact that at the end someone can go, of course, because you know that this wasn't totally unfathomable, the signs were there, but without making those signs so glaringly obvious that you go, come on, this was the bad guy. Do you enjoy writing the bad guy? Is that one of your favorite parts of writing domestic noir, psych suspense? Mandy, let's go with you.
I love writing the bad guy, but I think, you know, for me, the bad guy has shades of good as well, because don't we all?
Especially in this genre, I think, because again, we're not talking about a serial killer, or we're usually talking, and again, it's about that depth of character, isn't it? That the bad guy is somebody who is nuanced and has maybe been through something that's led them down a certain path.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you can show what that path is and why they do what they do, then, you know, I'm hoping that by the end of the novel, readers will feel sympathy for my bad guy, because that's what I wanted. That's what I want readers to feel. You know, everything's not so black and white. So but I do like writing, delving into the psychology of it and why.
Yeah. I think it's sort of similar as kind of sorry, it's difficult on Zoom, isn't it? I think the same was true for you, Fran, as well. I felt like your characters were very nuanced, and we went back and forth of do we fear this person, do we not fear this person, do we sympathize with this person, which obviously is because you've written a fully formed human with those shades of grey. Do you decide, Fran, before you write, who is the sorry, that's making noise on my computer. Who is going to be your bad guy?
I always start, as far as the characters are concerned, once I've got my setting, I always start with my bad guy, because my general philosophy is that your bad guy, whoever that is the hero of their own story. So if you start with them, then you are fully in touch with all of their motivations, and I basically work out like a reverse character arc for my bad guy, because I don't think many people who are bad think that they're bad. They're not intentionally bad a lot of the time, and I think that's the thing with psychological suspense, is that, you know, people are very nuanced and they have lots of motivations that aren't necessarily you wouldn't from the outside look at that and say, well, that's evil, that's bad. But it's just, you know, action upon action, it all adds up to create a negative experience for other people. And so I always start with my bad guy, and I always go in thinking, you are essentially my main character. If this was flipped the other way, then imagine what would happen. And that's a lot of fun as well. I tend to do a lot of, like I say, exploratory writing beforehand, so
it's really interesting. I love hearing how authors' process works, because I think it is always so different, isn't it? And that's something I was going to ask, actually. Helen talked about it in the last panel, the planner versus pantser. You sound like maybe you're somewhere, I definitely sit in between, actually. You sound like you're maybe someone that does that too. There's planning, but maybe not in such a traditional.
I've heard the term plantser. So you're kind of in the middle.
I might put that on my email sign off.
It's like discovery writing. I think it's probably more in line with a traditional pantser, So I would generally start with character rather than plot, and then I tend to work plot from point to point and plan from point to point. But I do like to have an emotional arc, and I took a creative writing course quite a few years ago, and a professor said to me, what you actually want is an emotional ending. You don't need to know where your characters end up physically, but you probably need to know where they're going to end up emotionally, and that's a lot looser, so you can really play with that.
Absolutely. How about you, Mandy?
I'm a complete planner. I can't, I have to, I've notepads, post-it notes, spreadsheets.
Do you have one of those amazing post-it note walls that some people have with the whole arc?
I usually have to do it on the dining room table, and then the cat walks all over it, mixes it all up, which sometimes helps the plot, so that's fine. But yeah, I do
in the way.
Yeah, I do have to plan. I can't imagine that, especially with the suspense, with twists along the way. How you could not plan.
Yeah, I think if you don't plan at all, you can tie yourself in knots, and then you find that something literally can't happen afterwards, and that's when you end up just head in hands, wanting to abandon the whole thing. So yeah, I think a bit of planning in whatever form you do it is helpful, isn't it? I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to have a quick glance at the Q&A and see. Oh, this is a good question. Someone just saying they're very excited for the Lighthouse.
Thank you.
Very happy to be part of the cover. Oh, the cover's great, isn't it? So
it's so gorgeous. It's really, if you guys haven't seen it, you should go and have a look, just because they did such a good job with it, and I'm just blown away.
Such a good, it's really, really good. Here's a question from Miriam Smith. Have you ever frightened yourself by the bad guy in your writing? That's a good question. Mandy? I mean, when we say the bad guy now, we're very much inverted commas. We're agreed, aren't we? But maybe at the bad guy's worst moments, when they're behaving in the least kind ways in which they behave.
I think when I'm writing it, no, because I understand, the motivation behind it, like we've talked about. But then sometimes if you think about what they do, just, with single actions, it is a bit like, oh, gosh, yeah, that's not very pleasant. And yeah, there are times when the editor did ask me to tone it down a little bit.
Really? That's a badge of honour. Those editors have seen a lot of stuff.
So yeah.
Okay, how about you, Fran?
Not frightened, because I tend to go as dark as possible a lot of the time anyway. And I think when you're like you said, Mandy, when you're in the kind of thick of it, you're so much in your characters' heads that you're just kind of progress, here's the next step, this makes logical sense as far as my character is concerned. And it's only when I take a step back later, and sometimes it's as late as, when I'm reading kind of through the proof or for copy edits later on, and I'm looking at it and thinking, I'm a bit unsettled actually, because this is a very logical step by step into something very bad. And I think that's concerning, that I can talk myself into that sometimes.
I've definitely had it when I've been home alone late at night writing, and I've started to freak myself out, especially if it's any sort of a similar, maybe the Lighthouse is removed enough from, I presume, I don't know, maybe you live in a lighthouse, I don't know.
Unfortunately no.
maybe it's removed enough from your day-to-day as well. I think we're out of time, looking at our time. Do you want to briefly talk about what's next though in your next projects? We've probably got one more minute, I think, if you both like to talk through that. Fran, do you want to go first? So I kind of write in two veins. So next year as well, I've got a fantasy book out, which I'm very excited about. It's a Great Gatsby retelling with witches, and that's called Wild and Wicked Things. But then beyond that, style, isn't it? That sounds amazing.
Yes, I'm so excited about that one. It's kind of like the book that I poured my heart into. And then beyond that, I've got another book with Avon out in 2023, and I'm not leaving Scotland. I'm going to stay in kind of that kind of atmospheric, spooky setting. So hopefully everyone will enjoy that as well.
Brilliant. You do it really well. So I think that's a good
Thank you.
Mandy, how about you? What's next?
So I'm in the thick of planning, so lots of spreadsheets, lots of post-it notes, Avon book 2 at the moment.
That well out of the way.
Yeah. So and then I've just finished a master's in creative writing. So I wrote a novel for that, but that was historical fiction, crime again. So I'm just waiting to see if anything will happen with that as well.
Brilliant. That sounds great. Thank you both so much for talking to me. I'll hand back to Ellie now. But thank you. That was great and so interesting. I hope everybody who was watching enjoyed as well, and is excited to pick up both novels, both of which I've read and both of which I absolutely hoovered up and loved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you so much.